What's good, YouTube? It's your boy King Leo, and today I'm bringing you guys another fantasy football video, giving you my sleepers to go get in fantasy drafts. Now, on the lineup today, I'm bringing you guys 2 quarterbacks that are sleepers, 3 running backs, 3 receivers, and 1 tight end. We're going to start out with the quarterbacks. My first quarterback that's a sleeper this year is Derek Carr. Now, last season, he finished as a QB 14, and right now he's in the consensus QB 15 range and is being drafted as the quarterback 13 on ESPN. So you guys might be like, well, isn't he going where he should be? Why is he a sleeper if he's in the same range? And I would say that that's based on last season. And to be a great fantasy football player, you have to project the future for a player. And a reason why I believe he's a sleeper is that last year he finished 5th in total passing yards. Like, it kind of doesn't add up, but there's multiple attributes to getting fantasy points. It's not just about yards, but he was 5th in total passing yards, and he was 2nd whenever he had his full weaponry around him and there was nobody injured. So he was a top flight passer last year. So the yards were there. The only problem with Derek Carr last year was throwing touchdowns. He only threw for 23 touchdowns last season. And to fix that issue, the Raiders went and traded for Davante Adams this offseason. And we know Davante Adams is notorious for scoring touchdowns. Davante Adams has had 29 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, and he's averaged 12 touchdowns a season over the last 6 years. So that alone should solve the touchdown problem for Derek Carr. And now some of you guys might be like, well, Davante Adams played with Aaron Rodgers. Anybody can do that. He can score tons of touchdowns. He's playing with an all-time great quarterback. And I would say that okay, we can go back to the last time Davante Adams wasn't on the Packers and he didn't have Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. We would have to go all the way back to his college days because he's always been with the Packers. So back in college at Fresno State, his freshman season, he scored 14 touchdowns in 13 games, I believe. And then in his sophomore season, he topped that and he went and scored 24 touchdowns in the season. And 24 touchdowns in a single season ranks 4th all time in college football history. So he's always been a touchdown machine no matter where he's been. And not to mention, his quarterback at Fresno State was Derek Carr. So in the 26 games that they played together, Derek Carr and Davante Adams had 38 touchdowns in 26 games. So if Davante Adams comes to the Raiders and adds his touchdown share average over the last 6 years of 12 touchdowns, that would have put Derek Carr at the QB7 spot based on last season's scoring leaders for fantasy. So Davante Adams fixes the touchdown problems for Derek Carr, and I really doubt that the Raiders will have the same exact amount of injuries going into this season. So, like I said, right now he's the consensus quarterback 15 on draft boards, but to me, Derek Carr is a lock to be a top 8 quarterback if everybody stays healthy, and he even has top 5 potential having Davante Adams there with Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller. So Derek Carr is a sleeper this year. Now, my next sleeper quarterback this year, Matt Ryan. Last year, Matt Ryan finished as the QB 19 last season in a terrible, horrendous, I could use so many words to talk about that Atlanta offense. It was terrible. It was bad. And he got traded. Yeah, he got traded. I don't know if he got traded or signed, but either way, he's got a new team, the Indianapolis Colts, and he's joining a team with one of the best offensive lines in football, and now he's surrounded by an abundance of talent and playmakers. The Colts have Jonathan Taylor, Nyheim Hines, Michael Pittman, Paris Campbell, Alec Pierce, tight ends Mo Alley Cox, Jelani Woods. So he has a lot more talent around him now than he did last season with Atlanta. Now, looking back at last season for the Colts, Carson Wentz finished as the quarterback 13 in this offense. And I feel like Matt Ryan still has it. Matt Ryan is a better quarterback right now, even at this part in his career. And he's definitely the more accurate passer. even though he doesn't have like the juice that he once had, or even the arm strength that Carson Wentz has, I think that the former MVP can do just as well as Carson Wentz did, if not better. You know, the Colts, they pride themselves upon running the football, throwing off play action, and using the screen game. And all Matt Ryan has to do is just get the ball into the hands of his playmakers and let them work, let them rack up the fantasy points for him. It's not like Matt Ryan has to go put this team on his back. All he has to do is throw the ball accurately and on time, which he's done his whole career. He's played consistently for a very long time in this league. You know, former MVP, he can do that. So right now he's the consensus 19 among platforms, but I think that he could really end up as a high-end QB2. So now moving on to the running back position, I'm going to give you guys 3 running backs. First running back, Travis Etienne. Now remember, this is for PPR drafts or leagues. I wouldn't say Travis Etienne is the guy to go for in the standard league, but for PPR, he is a sleeper to me. We know that he's coming off of an injury, and there might be questions and like hesitation picking him because of the uncertainty of how he'll be when he comes back onto the field. It'll be his first time playing in 2 years. But he's coming off of a Liz Frank injury, and that typically takes 3 months to recover from. So he's had plenty of time. He's had a full year to recover now. And to confirm that, there's a Jaguars beat reporter, John Shipley. He said Etienne has looked impressive all offseason and looks to be the most dangerous weapon in the offense this season. So that tells me 2 things. 1, that confirms that he's healthy and that he looks explosive. 2, the Jags are going to get him involved in multiple ways. In college, Travis Etienne, he excelled at catching the football, and that boosts his value in PPR formats. He led the league and he led the nation in receiving yards this senior season, and he's also back playing with his old college quarterback Trevor Lawrence. And Trevor Lawrence, fun fact or statistic for last season, he led the league in checkdowns. So I feel like that also boosts the target share potential for Travis Etienne. Now, he does have competition there, James Robinson, but James Robinson did tear his Achilles at the end of the year, and the reports are that he's recovering well and quickly, but Jacksonville's not in a rush to bring him back, and simply because they have Etienne there, it's not like they are desperate to have James Robinson back or like they're a contending team that needs to win games right now. They're still a rebuilding organization, and Travis Etienne was a first-round pick, so they have a lot of draft capital invested in him. So Etienne is going to begin the season as the RB1. He's going to be heavily used in the passing game. When Robinson comes back, I can see it probably like a 50-50 split for carries and Etienne getting more of the passing work. But overall, you know, right now he's ranked in the RB19 range, and he's being drafted even later than that on some platforms. But I believe he can easily work his way into a high-end RB2 with the production and potential he has for this season. The next running back we're going to hit on, James Cook on the Buffalo Bills. Now, again, this is PPR. James Cook was a solid pass catcher in college, and that's going to boost his value coming into a PPR fantasy football league. Now, going into his situation with Buffalo, they're a very heavy passing offense. And again, PPR, passing, targets, catches, that's what we look for. And a player that they lacked in that offense was like a third down back who could catch the ball out of the backfield. And they tried to address that issue in free agency, going after J.D. McKissick. But McKissick, last minute, he turned back around and went to Washington. So they still needed a guy for that role. So they took James Cook in the second round of the draft. So that tells me that they have a plan and role prepared for him to step into immediately. And right now, he's sitting at number 2 on the depth chart. And I guess he's going to compete with Singletary and Zach Moss for carries. But realistically, to me, neither of those two have been great running backs. And I think James Cook has the potential to give this offense an extra level of juice that it needs to get over the hump. So who's to say that by the end of the season, it isn't a possibility that James Cook is getting most of the carries and a majority of the passing game work. I think that's, really likely. It reminds me of 2017 when Alvin Kamara came into the league, and the Saints had Mark Ingram and Adrian Peterson there, and there were guys that were going to dominate the carries, while Kamara and Ingram were going to split the pass catching duties, and they seen the explosiveness and talent that Alvin Kamara had, and he ended up running away with it and eventually becoming their RB1 of the future. And even in his rookie year, when he was splitting carries and touches with Mark Ingram, he was elite in fantasy. So if James Cook has, 60% of the potential that Alvin Kamara had his rookie year, then he's a guy that you want to draft, because right now he's in the RB39 range, but I think he can easily finish as a RB2 if he's given the opportunity this year. So we'll see, but I believe James Cook is a sleeper. Now, going into my next sleeper for running backs, it's a guy that's been relevant in fantasy for the past couple seasons now, and he's progressing each season, and that's Tony Pollard. Last year, he finished as RB28. Right now, he's ranked as the RB31 coming into the year, with an average of multiple platforms, getting a consensus ranking. And we know that he's still going to end up battling Zeke for carries. The number was 237 to 130 carries in favor of Zeke last year. And I believe that number is going to get even closer with Zeke aging and Tony Pollard, still being young and explosive early in his career. I can see that number going to 200 carries for Zeke to 150, 160 carries for Pollard. And there have been reports that in camp, Tony Pollard has been playing the slot receiver role with the first team in 11-on-11 drills. And that makes sense with his history at Memphis. He played slot receiver in college at Memphis. And Amari Cooper is gone. Michael Gallup is out earlier. We just got the report today that James Robinson had a foot fracture, and he's going to be out for some time. That was a guy Dallas brought in to rotate in the receiver lineup. So the Cowboys, who were the top 3 receiving core last year, are now really depleted and going to be heavily dependent on CeeDee Lamb. So they're going to look for ways, I think, to get Tony Pollard the ball in the passing game, whether that be out the backfield or putting him in the slot. And, also just as a running back, he's a premium handcuff still, as he's been the last 2-3 years. If Zeke goes down at all, we expect Tony Pollard to put up big numbers. And I think that this year he can be used in a similar way as Cordell Patterson was for the Falcons last year. And Cordell Patterson had a phenomenal fantasy year. So realistically, I think his floor is RB3 range, so anywhere from 25 to 36. But if Zeke goes down, he's instantly an RB2, really a top 5 potential running back if Zeke goes down. But we're going to keep an eye on this slot wide receiver role, see if they're really going to implement him and use him heavily in that role. I think that boosts his value significantly, because not only is he going to be getting carries, he's going to be getting more catches than he would catching out of the backfield. So Tony Pollard is another sleeper for me right now. I expect his ADP to go up now that James Washington is now out for a couple of weeks as well. So keep an eye on Tony Pollard's ADP. Either way, go take him in drafts. He's going to be a potential league winner. So with that being said, now we're going to move on to the wide receivers. My first wide receiver who's a sleeper this year is Darnell Mooney of the Chicago Bears. Last year, he finished as the wide receiver 23, and he's being drafted as the wide receiver 24 right now. So he's in the same range based on last season to this season. But last season, he was the number 2 with the Bears. And now that Allen Robinson is gone, that number 1 spot is wide open for Darnell Mooney to take. And even in the games last year when Robinson was out, Mooney averaged 10 targets with 78 yards per game. And if we take those numbers and we see that same target share this season over the course of a full year, instead of just the games that Allen Robinson was out, that would put Darnell Mooney top 5 in targets and yards based on last season's leaders. So if we can draft a guy that's being drafted as wide receiver 24 and he has the potential to end up top 5 in targets and yards, that is the steal of the draft. That's a league winner type of guy. I think also Justin Fields coming into his second season, we should expect overall improvement in the passing game from him and just the Chicago pass catchers. So I think Darnell Mooney is a wide receiver 2 floor right now with wide receiver 1 upside. So another guy for me, potential league winner, go snag him up. Next, sleeper for receiver, Rashod Bateman. Now, Rashod Bateman last season finished as the wide receiver 70. Wide receiver 70. He missed 5 games due to injury. And right now he's being drafted as the wide receiver 38 in drafts. But keep in mind that the Ravens spent a first-round draft pick on him. And this is going to be his second season. And the Ravens have a lot of draft capital invested in him. Marquise Brown, who was the wide receiver 1 last year for them, he's traded. He's gone. So I believe Bateman slides into that number 1 role. And there's no other real competition at the wide receiver spot. I mean, they have Mark Andrews to catch passes. He's like the only other viable option. But there are other receivers. I think Devin Duvernay is their number 2. So there's not real competition for him at the wide receiver spot to command targets from. Now, Marquise Brown, last year, he finished as the number 22 wide receiver in PPR formats last season in that number 1 Ravens role. But we know Lamar Jackson was out for some time last year. Now, while Lamar Jackson was playing, Marquise Brown was wide receiver 11. So he's, low-end wide receiver 1 in the Baltimore Ravens offense, even though it's we all know it's a rushing attack, heavy rushing, but their number 1 receiver last year, while Lamar was healthy, was wide receiver 11 in fantasy. So assuming that Lamar plays the whole season this year, Bateman could be in a very similar range to wide receiver 11. It might be 13, 14, 15, even go to wide receiver 20 if we were to go that far. He's being drafted as a wide receiver 38, so that's still, a lot of value being made up there. So I think he has wide receiver 2 potential, and he's being drafted as a low-end wide receiver 3, so a lot of potential and value there with Rashod Bateman. The last receiver that I have as a sleeper is on the Minnesota Vikings. That'll be KJ Osborne. Last year, finished as a wide receiver 40. And right now, this is going to sound crazy. So last year, he finished as wide receiver 40, but he's the consensus wide receiver 88 this season. Now, that makes 0 sense to me. Like, what happened? If he finished as wide receiver 40 and you're telling me that there's twice as many players that are going to be better than him that are being drafted, that knocks him all the way down to wide receiver 88, and he's only rostered in 2% of leagues on ESPN. I think last year, KJ Osborne, he's not a household name. He's still a guy we have to get used to, but he shined in spurts last season. When Adam Thielen was out from week 13 to 18, KJ Osborne was 18th in points during that time span, and he scored a touchdown in 5 of those 6 games. So I think Osborne being, he's young still. He's 25, I believe. He's an ascending player in the league. And Adam Thielen, the number 2 receiver in Minnesota right now, is 31. And we've seen regression last year, not only from, production, but an athletic standpoint. He doesn't look like the same exact player. Still a really good receiver, but we've seen regression athletically last year. And I think with KJ Osborne being an ascending talent, that he can see more opportunities. And some might argue, well, why would I draft him banking on somebody having to get hurt for him to be productive? KJ Osborne is the number 3 receiver on the depth chart for the Vikings. Now, last year, the Vikings ran 11 personnel, which is 3 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back, at the 5th lowest rate last year. And that could be why he ended up as wide receiver 40, because he wasn't on the field that much, other than when Adam Thielen got hurt. Now we know that the Vikings have a new head coach and a new play caller from the Rams, and we expect to see a lot what the Rams did last year implemented into this Vikings offense. Reports are that the Vikings offense are going to be very pass heavy. You know, Justin Jefferson has been telling us how crazy fun it's going to be this year. And the Rams last year, they ran 11 personnel 86% of the time last season. So if that gets brought over from the play caller from the Rams, now the head coach of the Vikings, KJ Osborne is going from being on the field the 5th lowest rate in the league to the number 1 rate in the league as a wide receiver 3. So he's going to see more targets. You know, more targets equals more opportunity, which is more catches, more touchdowns. So I think he has wide receiver 3 potential, and really, I would say wide receiver 3 floor, with the potential of a wide receiver 2. If somebody goes down like Thielen or Jefferson, he could easily be anywhere in that wide receiver 12 to 24, 25 range. And if you're getting a guy that's going undrafted that ends up in the top 30, that's a steal. That's a guy that people are sleeping on. I can't believe that he's only owned in 2% of leagues. Now, not all leagues are that deep. Some people have 16, 8-team, 10-team leagues, and I guess that might be why he's not going. But if you're in these 12, 14, 16 team leagues, go get KJ Osborne. Last but not least, going to the tight end position. I wanted to get more tight ends to talk about, but like when I was looking at where the tight ends are ranked and, you know, my projections for them this season, there wasn't really a big like name that stood out to me to where I'm like, why is this guy here? He has so much more potential. But I did come up with one name, and that's going to be Keke Coutee of the Chicago Bears. Last year, he finished as tight end 21, and he's being drafted right now as tight end 15 on ESPN. So you're like, well, he's already, you know, being drafted higher than what he finished last year. So how is that a sleeper? Well, the Bears featured him last year. He was 2nd overall in snaps among tight ends. So he's on the field a lot. So that's a lot of opportunity. And in these categories, routes ran, targets, receptions, and yards, he was at least 12th among tight ends in all of those categories. So pretty much every major statistical category outside of touchdowns, we're going to talk about it, he was 12th in, and he was on the field the 2nd most among tight ends this past year. You know, all of those numbers should stay the same this year, if not increase, because really the Bears, they don't have many receiving options. You know, Darnell Mooney, like we talked about earlier, but other than that, that's really the only 2 viable guys the Bears have. So I think Darnell Mooney and Keke Coutee are going to be utilized heavily this year, and you're going to get a lot of volume. Now, the knock on Keke Coutee is that last year he didn't score a single touchdown. He didn't score not one touchdown. Being on the field, having the 2nd most snaps among tight ends, he didn't score one touchdown. And that really hurt his fantasy finish and put him down to tight end 21. But I think that's bound to change. I mean, this guy's not going to go another season without scoring a touchdown. I think Justin Fields is going to progress. Also, Keke Coutee is going to progress as a player. And touchdowns are kind of luck. You know, when you're playing fantasy, I'm going to give you guys a tip that I've always used. Don't bank on touchdowns. Well, this guy is, you don't want touchdown-dependent players. This guy scores a lot of touchdowns, so I want to pick him. You know, it's a plus getting touchdowns, but you want guys with volume. Volume being targets, receptions, carries if you're looking at running backs, because ultimately the more opportunity that you have, the more opportunity that you have to score. Touchdowns really end up being luck a lot of the time. So touchdowns are just an add-on. Really, if we're balancing out, you know, averages, I don't believe Keke Coutee is going to score 0. You know, he could at least get anywhere from 4 to 8 touchdowns this year, and that will boost, you know, where he finished based on last year tremendously. So if he's being drafted as the tight end 15 right now on ESPN, I believe, you know, he has top 12 floor. I don't think he can be worse than the 12th best tight end this year, just based on, how much they use him in what's the word I'm looking for? How much they feature him in that offense, based on last year. And I think he can only progress this year. So being drafted as tight end 15, I think he has a top 12 floor. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 tight end, but he can definitely be in that anywhere from 6 to 12 range, like I said. So if you end up waiting on tight end, you're stocking up on running backs, receivers, and there's not really a value for you to pick at tight end. You get to the end of your draft and you're like, oh man, I don't have a tight end. Who am I going to get? Cole Kmet is sitting there. Grab him up. But anyways, that's going to conclude the end of this video. If you guys want to see more videos like it, let me know. Fantasy wise, I'm going to be doing mock drafts every Monday. And I think I might, I like the way this is going. I think that I might work another fantasy video in throughout the week. Other than that, we're waiting on the season to start. I think I'm going to do preseason breakdowns. The preseason, I think the first game is the 4th. This video is going on the 3rd, so expect videos on that game. I believe it's the Raiders and somebody, but I got more content coming for you guys. If you guys made it this far, thank you for watching. Like the video, I would appreciate it. Subscribe to me. Share the video with anybody that loves football, that plays fantasy. But other than that, I hope you guys have a good night, a good day whenever you're watching this. But peace.